You never really know people. That's the lesson I've learned watching my best friend David's life unravel before my eyes. David, a guy who looked like he walked off the cover of GQ, with his sharp jawline, effortless charm, and a head of thick, perfectly styled hair, had what seemed like the perfect life, or so we all thought. He and Rachel had been married for 20 years. They built everything together, their 3 kids, a thriving business, and a mansion that looked like it belonged on a reality show about the rich and famous. Rachel wasn't the kind of woman who turned heads everywhere she went, but she had this warm, nurturing vibe that made you feel safe. She idolized David for years, always glowing with pride when she talked about him. To her, he was the sun, the moon, and every star in the sky. But I guess even stars fade over time. The cracks started to show in subtle ways. She didn't laugh as much at his jokes. He'd complain about her nagging, and she'd roll her eyes behind his back. Still, nothing prepared us for what came next. One evening, David called me out of the blue. His voice was shaky, almost unrecognizable. "Mike," he said, "I need you to come over." There was something in his tone that made me drop everything and rush to his house. When I got there, he handed me his phone. No words, just handed it over. I stared at the screen, confused at first. Then it hit me like a sledgehammer. There were photos, explicit photos, of Rachel. And she wasn't alone. She was with Enrique, their house cleaner, a scruffy guy in his mid-30s who always smelled like cheap cologne and looked like he'd just rolled out of bed. "This has to be fake," I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. But David shook his head. "They're not," he muttered. "She admitted it." I was floored. Rachel? The same Rachel who used to cry during sappy romantic movies? The one who baked cookies for the neighbors every Christmas? She'd traded in her picture-perfect life for that guy? Why? I asked, still reeling. David sank into the couch, his head in his hands. "She said she was bored," he finally managed. "She said she wanted excitement, adventure." Excitement? With Enrique? The guy's idea of adventure was probably deciding between Bud Light and Coors. It didn't make any sense. But then David dropped the real bombshell. She's been going to parties with him. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. "You know the kind I mean." And I did. The adult kind. The kind where morals and vows are left at the door. I stared at him, speechless. David's life was a car crash I couldn't look away from. And this was just the beginning. After that night, David became a man possessed. He wasn't just trying to understand why Rachel had done what she did. He wanted answers to questions most people wouldn't even dare ask. How long had it been going on? Who else knew? Was he the last to find out? The first thing he did was confront Enrique. It happened in the middle of the day, right in the driveway of their mansion. David told me about it later, his voice laced with both rage and disbelief. "I asked him if he loved her," David said. "You know what he did? He laughed, right in my face, said she was just fun." David's fists clenched as he relayed the story. "I swear, Mike, I almost killed him right then and there." But he didn't. Instead, he fired Enrique on the spot and sent him packing with a severance check big enough to make him disappear. At least, that was the hope. Rachel, on the other hand, was harder to deal with. She was defensive, then apologetic, then angry, all in the span of a single conversation. "You were never home," she snapped at him during one of their arguments. "You were always at work or the gym. I felt invisible." "So, your solution was Enrique?" David shot back. "You couldn't talk to me? You had to, what? Drag our lives through the mud?" "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It just did." David told me later that her words felt hollow. "She didn't mean for it to happen," he mocked bitterly. "What does that even mean, Mike? She made a choice, over and over again." But the worst was yet to come. As David dug deeper, he found out just how far Rachel's adventures had gone. Enrique wasn't just some fling. He was her ticket into an underground world of decadence and debauchery. And now that door had been kicked wide open, exposing secrets that would change everything. When David finally hit rock bottom, he didn't react the way I thought he would. Instead of spiraling, he came up with an idea that shocked even me. "If she wants excitement, I'll give her excitement," he told me one evening over drinks. His tone was calm, calculated, and unnervingly cold. "She wants a thrill? Fine. Let's see how she likes it on my terms." "What are you talking about?" I asked, already uneasy. David smirked, but there was no humor in it. "I'm going to let her have her freedom. She can go to all the parties she wants. She can even find someone else, someone more appropriate, but it'll be under my rules." "Your rules?" I repeated, not following. "She thinks Enrique was embarrassing," he continued. "I'll give her someone from our circle, someone who won't make her look like a desperate fool." I stared at him, unsure if he was serious or if this was some kind of twisted joke. But David was dead serious. Over the next few weeks, he orchestrated a plan that could only be described as manipulative brilliance. He subtly encouraged Rachel to meet a new friend, someone who moved in their social circles. He even set up situations where they'd cross paths, making it seem entirely coincidental. Rachel, perhaps desperate to save face after the Enrique disaster, fell for it. She found herself drawn to a man named Greg, a suave, polished guy who was every bit as charming as David. At first, David seemed almost pleased, but then things took a darker turn. What started as a calculated move by David quickly spiraled into something none of us expected. Rachel and Greg's relationship moved fast, almost too fast. She started spending more and more time with him, flaunting their connection as if to prove something, to herself, to David, or to the world. At first, David didn't seem to mind. "Let her have her fun," he said, shrugging it off. But as weeks turned into months, it became clear that things weren't going according to his plan. Greg wasn't just some pawn in David's game, he had his own agenda. One night, David called me again, his voice laced with anger and desperation. "She's trying to bring him into the business," he said. "Our business, Mike, the one we built from nothing. Can you believe that?" "Wait, what?" I asked, stunned. "Greg's been whispering in her ear," David continued, "telling her she deserves more control, more recognition, and now she's talking about giving him a position, a real position." That's when it became clear that this wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. It was about everything David and Rachel had built together, their family, their business, their legacy. And Greg was slowly, methodically inserting himself into it all. David tried to confront Rachel about it, but she was defiant. "Greg believes in me," she said. "He sees my potential in a way you never did." "Potential?" David shot back. "Rachel, he's using you. Can't you see that?" But Rachel was too far gone. She believed Greg's lies, and she was willing to risk everything for them. The tension between her and David reached a boiling point, and it wasn't long before their fights turned into full-blown wars. And then came the moment that changed everything. David, in a move I didn't see coming, decided to fight fire with fire. If Rachel was going to bring Greg into their lives, David would bring someone else in too. And that someone was young, beautiful, and ambitious. Everything Rachel wasn't anymore in David's eyes. Her name was Emma, and she was a storm wrapped in a silk dress. The moment she entered David's life, everything changed. And Rachel didn't take it well at all. Emma's arrival wasn't just a disruption, it was an earthquake. She was everything Rachel feared, a younger, more vibrant version of what she used to be. Emma played her role perfectly, charming everyone in David and Rachel's circle, including their children. Rachel's jealousy turned into paranoia as Emma's influence grew. It all came to a head at a gala the couple had planned long before their lives fell apart. Rachel arrived with Greg, trying to reclaim her place as David's equal in their world. But Emma was there too, on David's arm, radiating confidence and control. The tension between the two women was palpable, and it wasn't long before their animosity boiled over. In the middle of the evening, Rachel confronted Emma in front of everyone. "You think you can just walk in and take my life?" she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. Emma, unbothered, smiled coldly. "I'm not taking anything. You handed it over the moment you let Greg into your life." David, standing nearby, finally stepped in. "Enough," he said, his voice firm but exhausted. "This isn't about Emma or Greg. This is about us, what we let happen." Rachel turned to him, tears in her eyes. "You think I wanted this? You think I planned any of this?" "No," David said quietly, "but you started it, and now I'm finishing it." The room fell silent as David announced, in no uncertain terms, that their marriage was over. "I won't let this destroy what we've built, but I won't fight for something that's already gone." The fallout was immediate and messy. David filed for divorce the very next day. He didn't contest anything, letting Rachel walk away with her share of the wealth they had built together. But it wasn't money that hurt her. It was the children. They had found out the truth, every detail of her betrayal, and they didn't forgive her. One by one, the kids stopped speaking to her. To them, she was the villain in a story they couldn't rewrite. Even Greg, the man she had sacrificed everything for, abandoned her. He was never in it for love, only for what he could gain. And when Rachel couldn't deliver the empire he dreamed of, he disappeared without a trace. David, on the other hand, refused to marry Emma or anyone else. She had served her purpose, but David wasn't looking for another relationship. "I need to rebuild myself," he told me one evening, sipping a whiskey by the fire. "I thought wealth would bring us everything, but it ruined her, Mike, and maybe it ruined me too." Rachel faded into the background of our lives, a cautionary tale we rarely mentioned. She lived comfortably on the money David had left her, but without her family, it meant little. As for David, he focused on his business and his kids, trying to mend the pieces of his fractured world. He became a quieter man, more reflective, less certain of the glittering life he had once thought was perfection. In the end, no one truly won. The damage was too great, the scars too deep, but there was one truth we all came to understand. The life of the rich is different.